Everyone should be able to see that now, correct?
Yes. Okay. So next we have What is a Quest by Kristen Yu, Nathan Sturtevant, and Matthew Guzdial. Go ahead, Kristen.
Okay. So the first thing I want to do is do a quick overview of my talk. So first I'll do an introduction, then talk about the literature survey that I conducted of quest definitions, talk about the different common elements in those quest definitions to create a unified quest definition, and then go through an example of an application of this new proposed quest definition. For introduction, the quests are a common gameplay piece which encourages players to interact with the game. They are most commonly associated with RPGs such as Dragon Age Inquisition. However, they are also part of other games such as the Super Mario Sunshine game, which is considered a platform. In procedural content generation, or PCG, it is a fast growing field where quests are also a common target for the procedural content generation. However, among PCG researchers, there is no consensus of what a quest is. This creates two main problems. The first is that there is a high barrier of entry into PCG research for quests. If a new researcher wants to create a new quest generation system, they have to go through and evaluate all of the proposed quest definitions for their new system, or they have to create a new one, which will just exasperate this problem. The second is that it can become difficult to compare the output of existing PCG techniques. If we have one technique which produces a quest with a set of properties that is different from a technique that produces a quest with other properties, it can be difficult to say which of these techniques would be better. To help solve this problem, I did a literature survey of all PCG papers that focus on generating quests. So I found 20 papers. 4 of these papers were omitted due to lack of a quest definition, which leaves 16 PCG quest papers, and they're all using different definitions of a quest. The next thing I did was try to look at the common elements in quest definitions. They are the task, action, or goal, the player, ordering, narrative, progression, reward, and specific. This last category was included because there were a couple of quest definitions that were ultra specific to their quest generation technique. To start out, I want to talk about tasks, actions, and goals. 10 quest definitions included wording that they're individual pieces that need to be completed. 4 of these definitions called them tasks, 3 called them goals, with 1 specifying a single goal and 2 referring to a set of goals. 2 of these definitions called them actions, and 1 definition called them quest points. I propose that we will compile all of these ideas into a single word so that there will be less ambiguity. I decided that quest points was not the correct word because only 1 definition referred to them in that way. When I was considering the wording of goals, I thought about when we usually talk about it in regular English, and it usually refers to a more long-term setting. So a goal for the player could be to complete the game. In order to complete the game, they have to complete all of the quests within the game. So it feels a little bit inappropriate to call a subsection of a quest as a goal and also to have the goal be the long-term achievement for the player because we're using the same word in 2 different contexts. To solve the issue of the last 2 words, I was referring to this definition TEO3, which bridges the gap by proposing that the task should be completed by actions that can be done in the game. So I'm proposing that we use the word tasks to singularly refer to this idea. 6 of these definitions include the concept of a reward. These are most commonly thought of as in-game items or money that can be given to the player. 3 definitions include the idea of progression. These include things like unlocking an area that was previously unavailable to the player, EXP points or skill points that allow the player to level up their character, or unlocking abilities that previously were unavailable to the player as well. Because we're actually giving the player these things as they're completing the quest, I'm proposing that progression can also be considered a reward. 7 definitions require that narrative be part of a quest. Within video games, there's a couple ways we can refer to narrative. The first one would be explicit narrative. So these are things that are just like cutscenes or dialogue that explicitly tell the story that the game wants to convey to the player. We also have sifted narrative, which includes set pieces or just plot points that players can fill in the details of their own making in order to create their own story. There is also the issue that there are quests without narrative. So these are most commonly found in daily quest systems that are provided in various games, which encourage the player to simply interact with the game without actually experiencing any narrative. Um, Three definitions include the idea of ordering. The first definition is that there proposes that there could be an ordering, but there is no specification of what kind of ordering it should be. The second definition proposes a total ordering, and the third definition proposes a partial ordering. I'm proposing we adopt the convention of partial ordering because it encompasses total ordering within it, but it also is specific enough to actually say what ordering it is. Three definitions require that the player complete the quest. This is important because there are some games like Pokemon where NPCs can actually have a level and can gain experiencing points similar to how a player might. Within Pokemon, there is a system called the daycare where Pokemon can gain experience points. However, the Pokemon can only be in the daycare when the player deems it appropriate. So then it just is a game mechanic for the player to take advantage of, and not the fact that the Pokemon is actually going on a quest. The last category is specificity. So three of these definitions are specific to the quest generation techniques. The first definition defines a quest as a planning problem. This has two issues. The first is that only algorithms that can solve a planning problem can then be used as a quest generation technique, but we already have techniques that aren't solving planning problems. And the second is that we would not present a mathematical planning problem to the player. The player will not know what to do with that, so it's kind of inappropriate to assume that we're going to be giving that to the player. The second definition defines a quest as something that's produced by their system. Nothing inherently wrong with that, but this particular system doesn't produce a quest that contains a reward, and there's a general agreement among the other quest definitions that a reward is something that should be included as part of the quest definition. And the last definition proposes that a quest is a hypergraph. And this is the same issue as the first quest definition. So only algorithms that can solve a hypergraph only algorithms that can solve a hypergraph are going to be able to be used as a quest generation technique, and we know that there are already techniques that do not solve a hypergraph, as well as the fact that we would not be able to present the hypergraph to a player because the player will not know what to do with that information. This brings me to my proposal of a general quest definition. A quest is a partially ordered set of tasks T that a player must complete in order to get one or more rewards from a set R, and the less than and equal sign defines the partial ordering on the set of tasks T. A reward is an in-game item, a narrative element, or a progression element. All these are considered reward because they're given to the player as the player is completing the quest. The bold R refers to the set of rewards that are possible within the entire game, and the capital R refers to the set of rewards that is present in a single quest. So the capital R would be a subset of the bold R rewards. I am also proposing that we adopt a general task definition as well to be more specific about what the player actually needs to do in order to complete the quest. So a task T is defined as the four tuples C, M, I, and RT. C is going to be the condition that must be made true in order to complete the task. M is the system that monitors the subsection of the game that's required to make C true. This can be things that monitor the inventory system, which will check to see how many items the player has gotten so that they can verify that the player's actually completed maybe an item collection quest, or things like a map monitoring system that checks to see if the player is in the correct location. This is influenced by my work at Improbable, which is a game development studio I'm currently collaborating with, and mirrors how a quest system is implemented in a video game. M and C are supposed to be different so that it can allow for some generality with M, but specifics with C. For example, if a player needs to collect 10 of one item in one quest and 20 of one item in another quest, they can use the same monitoring system, but the condition C would be different for each of those tasks. I is the presentation of the task. So these are things like text or dialogues that explain to the player what they should be doing or where they're going. They're map markers or other kinds of things that on their map, which might show the player where they need to go, and also in-game highlights or other kinds of features that can be seen by the player in order to direct them where to go. The reward RT is going to be allocated at the task level so that we can give a reward to the player as each task is completed and not necessarily only when the quest is completed. Now I want to walk through an example using Animal Crossing New Horizons. Within this game, there is a Nook Mouse system, which is a quest system that usually tracks more long-term goals for the player. there is a particular quest called Angling for Perfection, which it tracks how many fish the player has completed. There are 5 objectives within this quest. The first is to collect 10 fish, the second is to collect 100 fish, the third is to collect 500 fish, the fourth is to collect 1,000 fish, and the last one is to collect 2,000 fish. As the player completes each of these objectives, they're given a set of rewards. The first of these rewards is Nook Mile tickets, and the second ones are passport titles, which allow for creativity and self-expression of the player. To compare my proposed quest definition, I chose a definition that already exists. So I chose TR1, which states that a quest is a player task commonly found within role-playing games where players challenge to complete goals in return for some reward. In order to formalize this, it can be described as GR, where G is the set of goals and R is the single reward. I interpreted the wording of some reward similarly to how it's interpreted in reinforcement learning, where some reward refers to a single reward. In order to apply this definition to the Angling for Perfection quest, we can say that each of the goals within the set G is going to be aligned with an objective that is given within the Angling for Perfection quest. However, when we get to reward, it becomes a little bit problematic because we're restricted to a single reward, and we know that more than one reward is given to the player in this particular case. There's also an issue of ordering. So according to this definition, G5 could technically be completed before G1. However, in the real game, that is not possible. And there's also no information about the presentation of the quest to the player. Now I want to apply my proposed quest definition to the same quest. So we are going to assign the task T to each of the objectives in the Angling for Perfection quest, and then we can also restrict the ordering to be that T1 has to be completed before T2, which has to be completed before T3, which has to be completed before T4, which has to be completed before T5. This is going to be the set of rewards for the entire quest, which includes all of the Nook Mile tickets amounts as well as all of the passport title amounts. Each of the tasks then needs to be individually defined. The C for each of the tasks is just going to be how many fish need to be caught for the player in order to complete that particular task. The monitoring system M is going to be the same for all of the tasks, and it's just going to be a system which tracks how many fish have been caught by the player. The presentation I is going to be different for each of the tasks. Shown on the screen is the presentation for T3. In it, we can see that there are 2 stamps which show that T1 and T2 have already been completed, as well as the number of fish that was needed to be caught in order to complete that task. We have in the middle, we have a section saying how many fish the player is currently caught, as well as how many fish need to be caught in order to complete the current task, as well as there's 2 open circles which indicate that there are going to be more tasks for the player to complete, but there's no information about the specifics of those particular tasks. So the presentation for each of the tasks will just be the number of stamps that indicate how many tasks have already been completed, a tracking system which says how many fish the player is currently caught, as well as how many need to be caught in order to finish the current task, as well as the empty spaces which indicate how many more tasks the player needs to complete in order to finish the entire quest. The rewards for each of the tasks are just going to be assigned as follows and are given to the player when the player completes that task. So in conclusion, there is no consensus on a quest definition among PCG researchers for quest generation. To help address this problem, I did a literature survey of all of the quest definitions proposed by these researchers and tried to compile all of their work into a unified quest definition. And then I walked through an example to help illustrate the power of this new definition. Thank you.
Awesome. We have time for questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Kristen, thanks for the great talk. It's very nice to see a formal definition of quests. It's definitely the first time I see one. Could you say something about how you envision other researchers to use this formal definition?
I wanted to have a mathematical definition to help integrate it into computational generation techniques so that it's very easy to say, okay, for my quest generation technique, I am dealing with quests where each task can be completed by a single action. Maybe we're not defining multiple actions. So it allows us to use a common language. And so when someone says, let's generate a quest, it's not like, okay, well, how many things is the player doing in that quest? What is the player going to be given a reward? What is that reward? So I think it will just allow us to more uniformly be on the same page sometimes, because some of these words are very ambiguous.
I've got a question, if that's okay. Thanks for the talk. It's really good to see these attempts like this to disambiguate the language that's out there, because I agree it's super ambiguous right now and we need more of this kind of work. I'm wondering about, can you go back to the slide that shows the mathematical formalism, the different elements there?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe a couple before that.
You talking
Yeah,
about
like this
the
one.
task one? Yeah, okay.
Exactly, this is great, thanks. So I'm wondering about, or what your thoughts are on the relationship between these different objects. So right now it's kind of like we have a collection of things, and then that can be broken down into another collection of things. But it feels like in practice, there are relationships between these objects that are important and that you might want to specify. Like that these two things are used to produce the text that somebody would see, for example. Have you thought about that? Like any kind of functions that you might include into this representation beyond data objects?
I think that would be a good thing for me to try to work on as future work for this definition. I am a new PhD student in the field, and this is a first pass, so I would love to be able to iterate and further work this definition in order to make it usable for the most broadest application. So that would be a good point for me to consider in future work.
Cool, that sounds great. I hope to see some stuff like that in a future paper. Thanks.
I have a question. So in your literature review, did you come across work that tries to classify these quests based on different categories? Because I can imagine there being quests. So there can be quests where the reward is not shown to you until after you perform them, or quests where there are mini quests within them where you can't see how many mini quests there are and so on. Did you come across things like that?
So there are actually a couple of areas of video game research that attempts to define a quest. So there is a small subsection of research that is trying to focus on more general quest theory. So like you're talking about, like, let's take all of the quests in Skyrim and try to classify them into their pieces. So that work definitely does exist. In my when looking at all of these quest definitions proposed by PCG researchers, they weren't necessarily leveraging that work that's being done. So I decided to, for the sake of the paper, to focus on these ones. However, there are bodies of research that do exist, and I think it would be important and interesting to figure out a way to combine that research into this one and to make sure that it is more encompassing.
Yeah, thank you. I think it'd be great because then you can directly apply those types of quests to different games and classify games based on the kinds of quests that they have, and then use that for theoretical research. Thank you.
So I have a quick question. How well does this formalism take into account, I don't know, like sometimes you see quests that are kind of nested inside of other quests. So you might have, at the very beginning of the game, I get one quest that is win the game, and it's really just composed of every other sub-quest in the game. So that kind of nesting, like, does this structure capture that?
I would argue that the partial ordering of the task can allow you to capture that. So you can just say that if these tasks have to be completed before this other task, you can just say 3 have to be completed on the same level, and then we can go to the next level.
Okay, because yeah, I could definitely foresee creating just a super interesting tree out of all of these things. That'd be at least for me. I think that would be incredibly neat. But anyway, thank you.
Okay, great. So we have no more questions, so we can end over here. So this concludes our first paper session for INT. We now have a lunch break for the next 1.5 hours. So right now, the lunch break goes on from 11. No, right now it's 11 for me, sorry. 1 p.m. Eastern time till 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll be back here at 2:30. See ya.